We're commonly known at Riflecraft for working on bolt-action rifles, but we work on most types of rifles, and as the Remington and Marlin Warranty and Service Centre for the UK, we do quite a lot of repairs on Marlin guns and work on lever-action guns. And personally, I've hunted North America and Africa with a lever-action rifle. So we work on lever-action guns a lot too. And Marlin, once they were acquired by Remington and transitioned from being made in Connecticut, then being made in Ely, New York, and now being made in Alabama, the guns have gone through several iterations where the parts have been made in different locations, and the gun has had one or two teething troubles. It's now a very, very good gun. But the gun is not as slick as it might be when it first comes from the factory, and typically guns that are 10 or 15 years old work considerably more smoothly than a brand new gun. So there are ways that you can slick up a Marlin and induce that worked in feel straight away. And there's several parts that we work on when we're slicking up a Marlin. And you tend to start with the carrier assembly and the locking bolt, the breech bolt, and on the breech bolt you do both the cocking cam on the bottom of the breech bolt and the ejector slot that the ejector reciprocates in, and we work on the hammer of the gun. And then instead of trying to rework individual parts, we tend to fit Wild West gun replacement parts. So that's the Happy Tune kit, Lever Happy Tune kit, which has a replacement ejector, a replacement trigger and a follower in it. And rather than try and slick up the Marlin factory trigger, we've spent many hours trying to work on the Marlin factory trigger. It's a lot easier and frankly gives you a much better result to just replace the trigger. And then the finger lever, which is typical on the Marlin guns. You can buy models with the larger finger lever, but again, Wild West guns manufacture a replacement finger lever. So on this bottom gun you can see the replacement finger lever, and it's had all of the Wild West gun parts fitted into it. And when we're working on slicking up the action, what you can see from this factory part here is that on the underside of the carrier, that's how the carrier is orientated in the gun, and on the underside of the carrier, the finger lever grabs on that carrier until it works a smooth surface. And sometimes they bite in, and sometimes you get a bite point in there, which makes the lever very, very stiff to operate. So what we'll typically do is we'll go in and we'll polish the underside of the carrier. We'll polish the sides of the carrier as it reciprocates in the gun. These two sides drag on the sides of the receiver, so we want those lovely and smooth. And also at the rear of the carrier, it reciprocates around this pivot point in the gun, and it sits in the gun like that. So we polish that rear pivot area so that it will reciprocate in the gun nice and smoothly. And on the very nose of the carrier, we'll polish that surface, break that corner, break this sharp corner around here, so that the carrier itself is much, much smoother. And we do a very similar operation on the locking bolt, where we'll polish all of the surfaces where they drag on the side of the gun without interfering with any of the critical surfaces that you need for lockup. And on the breech bolt, the cocking cam on the bottom of the breech bolt, which cocks your hammer, and it's the slot that the ejector sits in, all need polishing. And then you can get a very, very slick action straight away. And on this bottom gun, you can see it's got a long Wild West gun rail on the top of it, which is not inexpensive. These are probably 250 quid just for that rail and iron sight assembly. You can just get a short Picatinny rail for the top of an 1894 for about 80 quid. So typically we will take a customer's 1894 and slick up the internals to make sure that they function correctly, and then replace some of the parts which are a lot easier to replace than they are to rework. And then you end up with a gun that functions much more smoothly straight out of the box. And because I'm a gunsmith, not a cameraman, I got asked to explain this in a little bit more detail. So here is the carrier as it comes from the gun, where you can see on the bottom of the carrier a bite point has been worn by the finger lever, and that's bitten into the metal because the surface as it came from the factory is quite rough, and then it means that you can get some a mechanical adhesion and bite into both the carrier and the finger lever. And in contrast, this is the bottom of a carrier that we've polished on the linishing wheel, and we've reduced the surface tension there by increasing the quality of the finish on the bottom of the part, making it much more difficult for the finger lever to bite into the carrier. And you can see the difference in the finish on the rear pivot point on the carrier. You can see on the side walls of the nose of the carrier where we've done the same exercise to increase the quality of the finish on the side and reduce what's called the CLA, the centerline average, or the machining surface finish. And we've polished up the nose, broken the bottom corner here, and broken the corner right where the cartridge pops out onto the carrier, and before the carrier, so the cartridge pops out onto the carrier and then the carrier lifts it up for it to be fed into the chamber. So a little more detail on what we do on all of the parts that we slick up inside an 1894 or an 1895, just to make them cycle a little bit more smoothly without interfering with any of the critical tolerances and without voiding any of the factory warranty.